Joining me now, Tel Aviv, NBC News correspondent Grant Vincent, and from Washington, former State Department official Joel Rubin, and Time Magazine's Michael Crowley. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Joel, I'll start off with you here and focusing just quickly on Egypt before we transition to the peace talks happening later today. But human rights groups have said that many of those killed over the weekend were shot in the head or chest, and the killings took place over several hours. According to Politico, the New York-based group said it's a spokesperson to the witness and reviewed extensive video footage of the event, basically in a sense implying a massacre of many of these people who were armed with makeshift armor and even helmets as the military pointed rifles at them. Some of the video cannot be confirmed, but nevertheless, 82 people, and you have a Secretary of State here saying this country is on the brink.
Yes, Tamron, and the administration has been very patient and been reaching out to the Egyptian authorities. We're witnessing a struggle here that does have deep roots. The military, the security forces, they have been at odds with the Muslim Brotherhood for decades. But this latest episode and the violence that is in the streets does undercut some of the rationale that the generals provided when they moved out Morsi. And they do need to get back to a process and try to ensure that that process is peaceful and that it's inclusive. Otherwise, we're going to see further repercussions, certainly here in Washington, as the debate is right now very hot.
And Michael, as I mentioned, yet again, you have people focused on the billions of dollars in aid sent from the U.S. to Egypt as this chaos continues, and with Secretary Kerry calling for meaningful political dialogue, which seems impossible when you hear Ayman Mohideen's report and what could happen even this afternoon or this evening there.
Yes, and we'll continue to make those calls, and the U.S. does have some influence there, but I think that a lot of Americans may overestimate somewhat how much influence we do have. $1.5 billion is a large sum for us to be giving. They are our number 2 recipient of foreign aid. But that number is really dwarfed by the assistance Egypt is getting right now from some of their neighbors. Arab countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE recently put together an $8 billion aid package, and there will be more beyond that. And there's a lot of bad blood towards the United States right now. We supported Mubarak for a long time. He was very unpopular. So it's not like Washington can come in and say this is how things should be and everyone will listen to us.
And Grant, let me bring you in again. As I mentioned, you're NBC News correspondent based in Tel Aviv. Let's talk about the talks headed this evening. Obviously, timing is everything, but I was struck by a statement in the Washington Post from a Palestinian spokesperson who says that the talks will be more difficult. The conditions are more difficult than previous. And the direct quote was, but I think there is a recognition of the urgency. If we don't move fast and decisively, things could fall apart. What indications that this time is the right time? Grant.
Well, there are indications, Tamron, that things are very much the same as they have been for 20 years in terms of what's at stake of the peace process. And what hasn't changed is that the most that one side in these talks is willing to offer falls far short of the least that the other side is willing to accept. Take the issue of the 1967 border, for example. The Palestinians want to return to the 1967 borders, want a return of the land which Israel took from them in the 1967 war. Prime Minister Netanyahu has made very clear that that is not going to happen. He sees the 1967 border as indefensible, and he's given us no reason to think that he's prepared to sacrifice Israel's security on that front for a kind of peaceful resolution.
But as you point out, even just the jump start of this and some of the things that are immediately on the table or of concern have already faced opposition. Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to release some of these prisoners. There was a headline in a daily paper, the murderers will be released, but he was able to push through this move to release these prisoners in an attempt to, I don't know if the proper word is good faith, but certainly in an attempt to move this forward in a solid way, Garant. But how is it being received overall from what you've observed?
Well, Benjamin Netanyahu said it was a really tough decision really tough on the families. You know, he's releasing prisoners who have killed Israeli citizens in the course of the last 3 or 4 decades. When the cabinet voted in favor of the decision yesterday, outside of the Knesset there were protesters, families holding up, you know, bloodied hands, accusing the Israeli government of betraying the memory of those people that have died. I have to say, I think mainstream Israeli opinion will recognize the need for this prisoner release as a kind of signal of good faith ahead of the talks which get underway tonight in Washington. I should say, though, I talked to a member of the Palestinian leadership this afternoon. They said that the release of the prisoners was something that had been agreed in Oslo 20 years ago, and what the Israeli government is doing is dressing up an old commitment as a new concession to make itself look good as it heads into these talks.
And Michael, with that said, in the reporting from Garant there, then it all falls back to the constant conversation of border and where the United States stands, what the United States is willing to support, and any movement there.
That's right, and I think it comes back to a large degree to President Barack Obama. He has hung back thus far in this process. He has let Kerry take the lead. There's some theorizing in Washington that he more or less said, go ahead and give it a try, John, if you want. You know, that he's skeptical, having been basically burned by his first try at the peace process in his first term, and that Obama will kind of step in if it looks like things are starting to get serious. But for a deal to happen, it may require the White House, for President Obama, to stick his neck out and to really present the outlines of a plan to get specific on what the borders might be like and to risk some political capital on it. So that's the key question, but it's a very tough question, and it's a question that burned the president in his first term. And so it will be very interesting to see when and how. I know he made a kind of pro forma statement today, but when and how he really gets more involved and puts something on the line there.
Well, the 67 border formula, Joel, we've heard the president, his views on this, but back to what Michael pointed out regarding Kerry's involvement. We know behind the scenes for months he's been working to get to this point. How do you see his role if this is to be a successful gesture and we might see some kind of resolution in the next 6 to 9 months? At least that's some of the estimates that I've read.
Yes, Tamara, Kerry's involvement has been quite masterful. What we've seen is a Secretary of State grab control of this issue and go, in a sense, behind closed doors and get the leaders to agree that not only are they going to start negotiations, but they're also going to keep quiet the details surrounding those negotiations. But in addition to that, he's building the political space around this. The American Jewish community, for instance, oftentimes was very vocal in the first term about concerns regarding the peace process. This time largely is very much in support. The Arab League as well modified a statement in support of Middle East peace that it had made 10 years ago and updated it, calling for 57 Muslim states to have peace with Israel. So we're seeing a fuller orchestration. Kerry's involvement means the State Department will be mobilized. It means that he can tap the president when he needs to, and it's setting a good baseline for the renewal of talks.
Joel, Michael, Garant, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it, gentlemen.
Thanks, John.
And still ahead.